Happy study. This is Heidi. Today we're going to be going into 1 Samuel 13 through 15. Let's start with a word of prayer here really quick. Dear kind Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all of the many blessings you've given us. Thank you for how we're able to study in the Bible now and how we have the multiple different translations to try to come to learn of your word better. And just thank you so much for your word and for preserving it so that way we can learn from it. And Father, as we study, please help us so we'll be able to take it and to apply it into our lives and to learn from these people that we get to read about that who lived and who knew you. And please help us so we'll be able to strive in our lives to be able to come to know you and to learn more and more from you. And Father, just please be with all of those who are listening, that they'll be able to also receive answers to questions that they have, and that they'll be able to take this and start studying in their scriptures so they can come to know you better and also receive more answers. And thank you again, Father, for all of our many blessings. We say these things in Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so coming into 1 Samuel 13 through 15, we came off of the building up of Saul. He had such a bright future. Things were looking great for him. Now we're going to see that this is going to come in stages as well, for it to turn the other way. I feel like this is how it is in life in general. It's usually a slow fading. It's not normally like all of a sudden, boom, and then there's no belief anymore. It's usually kind of a gradual slip. And this is what we're going to learn from Saul. So starting off in chapter 13, there's a couple things that I want to point out. So this is when he became king and he had reigned for 2 years. He chose 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Mishmash, and there were 1,000 with Jonathan in Gibeah. Now, when it words this, the rest of the men were sent home. It's almost like he has now started to create an army. He's almost like getting bodyguards for him and Jonathan. And this is going to become important as we realize what the condition truly is for Israel right now. But with this, with him maybe possibly, in the antiquities of the Jews, they do say that it was like bodyguards. And for this, it kind of reminds me in 2 Samuel 24, David counts all of the men, and it is a sin because of the fact that he's no longer relying on God's provision to protect him. And this might be what Saul could possibly be doing here. Now, not counting the men, but having bodyguards and not relying solely on the Lord. And the reason why I say that is because we're going to see the character of Saul has slowly been changing. When we get further in here, Jonathan defeats a garrison of the Philistines that was at Gibeah. Jonathan, you're just going to come to love Jonathan. He is fantastic. And it's almost like in here, as we're kind of seeing Saul's reign kind of diminish, it's almost like, oh, maybe Jonathan's going to be the new king. It almost feels like it has that type of vibe because Jonathan, he is a pretty amazing young man. And when Jonathan defeats the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines, and that also that Israel had become a stench to the Philistines. What I want to point out here is that Saul already is taking credit for Jonathan's victory, and he is also not giving any credit to God. So when we're first coming through this, we could be like, oh yeah, well, he's the king, all that. But I want to point out just the little things where we're seeing these shifts in Saul's character. Okay, and so the people were called out to join Saul at Gilgal. When they come to meet Saul, the Philistines also muster up to fight with Israel. I want to really paint the picture of what this looks for the Israelites. So first off, there's 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen and troops like the sand on the seashore in multitude. And they're encamping at Mishmash, okay? Then we also have, so when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, the people hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in tombs and in cisterns. And some Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul was still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Right here you have that the Philistines, they outnumber them. They have chariots. They are going to be armed and skilled. The Israelites, if we actually go forward in chapter 13 and we go to verse 19, now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make themselves swords or spears. But every one of the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen his plows, his mattock, his axe, or his sickle. So on the day of battle, There was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people with Saul and Jonathan, but Saul and Jonathan, his son, had them, and the garrison of the Philistines went out the pass of Michmash. So to put into context how bleak that this looks, they don't even have weapons. So when they became a stench to the Philistines have a ton of control here. They're not even letting the Israelites sharpen their weapons. They are, coming at them. They've hard pressed them. They're kind of just crowding them in. And I know that the Philistines in this case are probably pretty confident in their ability to defeat the Israelites. And the Israelites are scared to death. I honestly cannot blame them where they don't even have their weapons. What I want to point out here, though, is the difference with Saul, because it feels like the Spirit is no longer here. If you remember, when Saul went to fight with the Ammonites, he had the Spirit of the Lord come over him, and they were bold. They were not timid. They were not afraid. They were confident. They went out to save the people of Jabesh Gilead. And here we see that they are like running away and they're fading. And we know from 2 Timothy 1:7, for God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And if you remember last time when they were outnumbered like this, and they were all gathered with Samuel, and Samuel did the sacrifice. When he did that, God sent thunder and he rumbled and he fought their battles for them, and the Philistines fled. But right here, we're not seeing this anymore. It doesn't feel like the Spirit of the Lord is with the people or with Saul at this point. And I just want to point that out as we're coming into Saul's character right now. Then we're going to go forward and we're going to see that Saul is going to do a very unlawful sacrifice. But looking at Saul's character, I don't know the last time that he's gone to the Lord first before dealing with the problems. What I mean by that is Saul, even his name Saul, is to ask for, is what his Hebrew name meaning is. And it's almost like he's asking, but he's never listening. He's always kind of like, let's go. And then he has to come back and think about the Lord. And I'm going to point this out a few different times throughout these chapters. So he waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. And as a pointer too, he's waiting at Gilgal right here. Gilgal is the same place where when Joshua crossed with the children of Israel, the Lord had him send back for each of the tribes of Israel. They collected a stone from the riverbed, since this had been parted, the water had been parted for them to cross. They grab a stone from the riverbed and they have these stones set around, and it was so that their children would be able to know what the Lord had done for them, and all nations would know the hand of the Lord is mighty. And this is in Joshua 22 through 24. So he's sitting in this place to try, this is a place where he could have remembered what the Lord did, looked at those stones, remembered what had happened here. But he's at Gilgal and the people are scattering from him. And Saul, he gets nervous, right? He wants to rally these people back. So he says, bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering instead of waiting for Samuel to do it. Now, I did wait for the 7 days, but I do wonder if it was maybe the evening of the 7th day. We don't know for sure. But we know that as soon as he finished doing this burnt offering, Samuel came. And Saul went out to greet him. Samuel said, what have you done? Now, this could have also been like a test for Saul to see if he truly would wait on the Lord. Are you really going to wait? Or are you going to act before? But we see, he says, what have you done? And Saul said, when I saw that the people were scattering from me and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. So he's like, hey, I didn't want to do this, but I forced myself to do this. Again, we see that he just is not waiting on the Lord. We're going to see that it almost feels like his relationship with the Lord isn't truly there. It's almost like he relies heavily on the sacrifices and different specifics instead of really coming to know the Lord and being obedient to what the Lord calls him to do. And so Samuel says to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. I want to go back to obedience because we learn this again from Eli in the first part of 1 Samuel. Obedience is required for God's promises. No one is above that. No one's above obedience. And right here we see that it's like, all right, Saul did not obey. And I want to go in because he says, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. If you remember in 1 Samuel 10:9, God gave him a new heart. He gave Saul a new heart. So this just goes to show that spiritual experiences are not necessarily a cure for spiritual woes. You have to work on your relationship with the Lord. It's not a one and done thing. It's a relationship that takes consistent work and time. And this is where I feel like Saul has not put in for like a relationship, more like I do the sacrifice, now I should have victory. So he's not actually, it feels to me like he is not seeking for that relationship. And this is going to be the beginning of the end of Saul's rightful reign. So we're going to see this in the next chapters to come as well. When Samuel leaves, he went up from Gilgal. The rest of the people went up with Saul to meet the army. They went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. Saul then numbers the people who were present with him, about 600 men. I highlighted this because 600 seems to be like a testing number when we see it in the Bible. With spiritual warfare and divine judgment. David had 600 men for quite a while. Goliath's spearhead was 600 shekels of iron, and Noah was 600 years old when he went to go into the ark. Only 600 Benjamites survived in Judges after that civil war. And in Exodus, Pharaoh goes after Israel with 600 chariots to the Red Sea. So I feel like when we see 600, oftentimes it also is dealing with like judgment, and is in the case of Pharaoh when he goes with his 600 chariots, and we know that they get covered up by the Red Sea. We know only 600 Benjamites. We know only 600 Benjamites survive in Judges, and so they had judgment poured upon them for their actions that happened for that civil war. And then David had 600 men who went out to fight with him, and they were almost exercising righteous judgment for others coming on. And then Goliath's spearhead at 600 shekels of iron. This was right before when he was taunting, and then we're going to have David who comes in. So it feels like it's like a testing number to see what's going to happen. When you see 600, it's almost like something's going to happen here. We know that these 600 men are very terrified. We know that they're very outnumbered. They do not have the ability to honestly fight the Philistines on their own. Only by God would they be able to actually dominate over in the Philistines. And we see that, and Saul and Jonathan his son and the people who were present with them stayed in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Mishmash, and raiders came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. So they're also sending out these raiders to kind of just like torment the Israelites even further. So this is a pretty desperate situation that the Israelites are finding themselves in. And unfortunately, they're finding it with also not having the Spirit of the Lord really with them. So that's why when we're going to come into chapter 14, we're going to see how the Lord does provide deliverance and how he can work his mighty miracles with just the faith of 1 to 2 people, and how that changes. So coming into chapter 14, we're going to read about Jonathan, the son of Saul, and the young man who carried his armor. So Jonathan says to him, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah. One thing I really want to point out is the terrain that Jonathan is going to be going with his armor bearer, and also imagining doing that with like beings with your sword and your armor. I couldn't imagine what Jonathan and his armor bearer are going to do. So the people did not know that Jonathan had gone out. And here, so there was a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other side. So this is what I'm talking about here. It's like steep, just rugged terrain of rocks. Like he's coming down and then he's coming back up. I love in Antiquities of the Jews, he also points out that the Philistines probably did not have as many men on this side because they didn't think anybody could probably get to them and attack them from that side. And I'm sure that the Philistines are pretty confident overall right now as they have more weapons, more people, chariots, like they're ready. And then this is why I love the statement that Jonathan makes. He says in here, this is in verse 6. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." Jonathan's faith here is huge. And his armor bearer responds, "Do all that is in your heart, do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul." So also the faith of Jonathan's armor bearer. I love this because we see that he takes the first steps of faith to go out against these Philistines. It's no wonder why we're going to see that Jonathan and David are going to become the best of friends. And it's no wonder why. We see this faith in Jonathan. And when Jonathan saw David, he was like, oh yeah, yeah, that is faith. Like, he's after my own soul. So I love that we see this with Jonathan, his faith. He takes the first steps, and then the Lord is going to we're going to see how the Lord acts for Jonathan with his faith. And I love too the even if. So it may be. Jonathan here actually really reminds me of Daniel 3:16-18, where I'm just going to read that really quick. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." I love this because you have this, it may be. And it's almost like Jonathan's like, whether he does or whether he doesn't, we're going to have faith in him because nothing can hinder the Lord from saving. And we see the Lord save Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're going to see that the Lord does save Jonathan and his armor bearer. Jonathan tells his armor bearer, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place and we will not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be a sign to us." I want to point out that Jonathan, I do not feel like he's seeking signs at all. I feel like he is acting in faith and going forward. And with that, it's not, "Hey, show me a sign, and if you do this, then I'll do this." It's very much like Jonathan's like, "Hey, here's what we're going to do. And if this happens, then we know that the Lord has delivered them into our hands. So let us go up." Like, they've already made a huge commitment going down the crags and coming up that other side. Once they show themselves to the Philistines, they say, "Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us and we will show you a thing." They're confident. They have weapons. They had advanced weapons compared to probably what Jonathan and his armor bearer had. They got large numbers. They're definitely not afraid of two Hebrews from looking down. They're like, "Yeah, come up." So Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him. Like, they are climbing up these rocks to go up. Like, I couldn't imagine just the fear of that, with also the Philistines probably being able to just, like, cut them as they're coming up, because it's steep and they're going to have both of their hands busy. But they go. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. So Jonathan is just going through, and his armor bearer is, like, making sure that they're dying. And that first strike, which Jonathan and his armor bearer made, killed about 20 men within, as if it were half a furrow's length in an acre of land. What I love about this is the Lord takes that faith as they go through. It's like he takes that and he waits to see their faith. And then as soon as they do, and there was a panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, the garrison and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. In the NIV, it says panic set by God. And in the King James, it says that there was a great trembling. So you have these two. I loved the panic set by God in the NIV. I also want to go into Antiquities of the Jews because I love how he records this as well. Okay, this is how the Antiquities of the Jews, how he brings it up, Josephus. This is book 6, chapter 6, verse, we're still going to be in 2, and then we're going to be like in the smaller verses, we're going to be at about 112. So Saul's son accepted of that invitation as what signified to him victory, and he immediately came out of the place whence they were seen by their enemies. So he changed his place and came to the rock which had none to guard it because of its own strength. From thence they crept up with great labor and difficulty, and so far overcame by force the nature of the place till they were able to fight their enemies. So they fell upon as they were asleep, and slew about 20 of them, and thereby filled them with disorder and surprise, insomuch that some of them threw away their entire armor and fled. But the greatest part, not knowing one another, because they were of different nations, suspected one another to be enemies. For they did not imagine that there were only 2 of the Hebrews that came up. And so they fought one against another, and some of them died in the battle, and some, as they were flying away, were thrown down from the rock headlong. So I love that we see how the Lord comes and he starts fighting this battle for Jonathan. All right, so Saul's going to come in to also help fight with the Philistines, and we know that there's just this huge, panic going on within them. We also there were some Hebrews that actually went into the Philistine camp to hide there with the Philistines, but even they also turned to be with the Israelites who are with Saul and Jonathan. So when they see this, they actually turn on the Philistines, and they are fighting now for the Israelites. Likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hid themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them in battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day. Okay, and I'm pretty sure if you were to ask Jonathan, he would have given it all back to the Lord, 100%. I'm not sure on Saul at this point if he would say the same. Now, there was a point in time where Saul did give all the credit back to the Lord, but it just doesn't seem like that is quite the case with where Saul is currently at in his spiritual relationship with the Lord. Saul then makes a rash vow. So we know he does an unlawful sacrifice. Now he's going to make this rash vow that is going to put actually a lot of strain, not just on Jonathan, but also on all of the Israelites. Okay, so this vow actually reminds me a lot of Jephthah. I hope I'm saying that right. When he vows, so this is in Judges 11, 30, and 31, and then finishing out 34 through 40. And Jephthah makes this vow that essentially in the end leads to him sacrificing his only daughter, which is just awful. And it was a rash vow he never should have done. Saul, if it was left to him, he would have killed his son Jonathan over this vow, this oath that he does also. So I feel like we're seeing Saul now in kind of a shadowing of some of the judges previous on their downfalls, things that they were doing that were not necessarily following the Lord as much anymore, kind of just the rash things that they did or the fading away. I feel like we're going to start seeing more and more of that with Saul. He reminds me of not the best sides of judges in these chapters. Okay, so in here, he makes this vow. The men of Israel had been pressed hard that day. So Saul had laid an oath on the people saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening and I am avenged of my enemies." So none of the people had tasted food. He has this whole army that has been pressed hard. And they have been, who knows the last time that any of them have really eaten? And now he's saying, hey, you're not going to eat until we kill all the Philistines. We're going. Okay, and they're chasing them down. They come into a forest, and there was honey on the ground. But the people were too afraid to eat any of the honey because of this vow that Saul had made. Okay, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. So he put the tip of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food this day.' And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little of this honey? How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found. For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. They're trying to pursue them, but they don't have the energy to even pursue them.'" So Jonathan, he's like, this is not a good idea, Dad. He's like, why would you do that? Okay. Jonathan disobeys his father's rash oath. And now we're going to see too how much that this oath is actually going to hurt the Israelites. Because Jonathan is like, hey, we could have killed more of the Philistines if actually we would have been filled. If we would have had the energy to do so, we could have done this. But now we're going to see too what this oath does to all of the people. We see that Jonathan disobeyed the king's oath, the king's vow, But now we're going to see what the people do against God. So going forward, they struck down the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ahijalon, and the people were very faint. So they're exhausted, right? They haven't eaten, they've been journeying a lot, they've been fighting. It's a lot of energy, and they're tired. So the people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Now you have, because of Saul's rash oath, you have the people disobeying an actual direct law of God's. So we're going to go really quick into Genesis and Leviticus. So we're going to go into Genesis 9:4. And it says in here, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. Okay, then we're going to go into Leviticus. We're going to go into 17. And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourneth among you eat blood. And whatsoever man there be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, which hunteth and catcheth any beast or fowl that may be eaten, he shall even pour out the blood thereof, and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. The blood of it is for the life thereof. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, ye shall eat the blood of no manner of flesh, for the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Whosoever eateth it shall be cut off. We have that Jonathan disobeyed something that was human made, but now we have the Israelites disobeying God's direct law. So both of these are with eating, but one is obviously way more intense than the other, right? So Saul realized what's happening. They told Saul, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with blood. And he said, you have dealt treacherously. So I'm like, wow, Saul, this was kind of your idea that kind of led him to this. But he says, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me here. And Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, let every man bring his ox or his sheep and slaughter them here and eat, and do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night, and they slaughtered them there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord. This kind of leads a question when we're likening scriptures to ourselves. Do we serve the Lord only after in times of desperation, or are we having an altar up to the Lord well before this? Saul has been king now for 2 years plus some, and it was the first altar that he built to the Lord, and it's in time of desperation because he knows how bad that this sin is, which is a sin that he tried to control a situation that he should have just handed over to the Lord anyway. Like, he put in this vow that then is hard pressed for his people. And now there's repercussions for that. But now that he's desperate, he's like, oh, crap, we need to serve the Lord. Like, let me erect this altar. Last minute preparation, like, here we come, we're going to serve the Lord. And then when it gets going further, then Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. But the priest said, let us draw near to God here. So we see that Saul, he does his first altar in desperation, and then he's like, okay, let's go. And the priest is like, hey, let's draw near to the Lord here. Let's see what the Lord wants us to do. He still has to be reminded by the priest to be like, hey, this isn't just in times of desperation. We need to know what he wants us to do. So Saul, he inquires of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. I wonder if some of this could also be because those who draw near to the Lord frequently, like Samuel, are going to have an ask, and then boom, he was sent an answer, right? Not all the time is it exactly like that, but there's this cry, and then there's God coming to save. Right here, we see that Saul more so like he has not been close to the Lord. So I could see the Lord also being slow to answer him. Also with like Samuel coming to him later than those 7 days, it makes me wonder if it's just like the Lord is slower to answer because Saul has not been seeking the Lord so much. So Saul says, "Come here, all you leaders of the people, and know and see how this sin has arisen today." And he casts lots to see who this sin falls upon. He finds out that it's Jonathan. Saul then he goes to inquire of God. I wonder in here, because if you go back actually to chapter 8 in 1 Samuel, there is, at the end, he tells them, "And in the day that you will cry out because of your king." Now he's saying because of your king, "whom ye have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." I almost wonder, because Saul is drifting away from the Lord, I wonder if the Lord is just not as quick to answer Saul. But Saul does also figure out that it's like, hey, somebody has sinned this day. Not to mention all the Israelites who ate blood. But he's like, hey, who did this sin? So, "For as the Lord lives who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan, my son, he shall surely die." So this is, again, we're like, that rash vow, if it were not for, we're going to see the people, he would have killed his son, just as Japheth killed his daughter. Okay, so he says, hey, they go and they cast lots. So he says, "You shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan, my son, will be on the other side." And the people said to Saul, "Do as seems good to you." Therefore Saul said, "O Lord God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? If this guilt is in me or in Jonathan my son, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if the guilt is in your people Israel, give Thummim." And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. Then Saul said, "Cast the lot between me and my son Jonathan." And Jonathan was taken. So we have here, Jonathan ate the honey. Saul says, "What have you done?" And Jonathan admits, like, "I tasted a little bit of honey." And then he says, "Here I am, I will die." Jonathan is still willing, kind of like Japheth's daughter was like, "Well, then you must do this thing, like you must kill me." Jonathan also, he willingly goes. It's almost like, too, if I think about this in the sense of Abraham, when God commands him, Isaac doesn't fight him when it comes down to it, right? And it's almost like Jonathan is willing to die over this oath that he knew was never good. At least with the story of Abraham and Isaac, it was the Lord who actually did command this. Saul, there is nothing showing that the Lord commanded him to do this rash vow. And Jonathan is still willing to die over this. Even though Jonathan knew it wasn't a good idea, he's still willing to die for it. Then the people say to him, first off, and Saul said, "God do to me, and more so also. You shall surely die, Jonathan." Then the people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day." What I love about this, "as the Lord lives," was like the oath of oaths in the Old Testament. This was a big deal. These people would have potentially been willing to die and fight to save Jonathan from Saul here. They redeem him in a sense. They ransom Jonathan so that he is not one hair will fall to the ground. If it were not for the people, Saul would have killed his son Jonathan, but the people see that Jonathan, he has worked with God this day. Jonathan's faith is what saved Israel so the Lord would fight their battle for him. It wasn't Saul. It was not Saul. It was Jonathan's faith in the Lord, and the Lord remembers those who are faithful to him. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. We're now going to have just like a quick overview of Saul. It's going to say in here that he did valiantly and struck the Amorites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them. So we do see that Saul, he does save. There was the question, like, can he save in the first chapters before this one? And now we see that it's like, no, Saul does save during his reign. We get an outlay of his family. So we know that he has 3 sons and he has 2 daughters, and it names his wife here. And then we also find out that Abner, the son of Ner, so Saul's uncle, turns out to be the commander of his army. And that's going to become pretty important because Abner is going to be a huge player going forward in 1 Samuel and also in 2 Samuel. So Abner, it is important to know who he is. And there was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong or any valiant men, he attached him to himself. So in the King James Version, it says he took him unto him. Okay, so we find like just a quick little overview of Saul, what he did, his kids. They just do a quick little overview right here, right before we come into chapter 15. And I think the reason why they did that recap is because chapter 15, we're going to find out that Saul is no longer going to be the anointed, set apart king for the Lord. This is going to be pulled away from him. It's going to be torn from him. So I think they do that recap because it's like this is when he's actually the valid king. And here's his recap before we get in, because we're going to read still continuously about Saul. He still acts as king for quite a while after he's already lost kingship. He still sits in that role. It's not an easy job for David to become the next king of Israel. Starting into chapter 15, one thing that I really want to point out is that we need to find our worth in the Lord. It's one thing to be humble, but it's something else entirely to be insecure. And I think with Saul, we see a lot of insecurities. We went over that in the previous chapters. And then we also see oftentimes with insecurities, pride usually will also step in to kind of compensate for those feelings of inadequacy. And we're going to see both of those really come in with chapter 15 before the kingdom is removed from Saul. And it says, and Samuel said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over this people Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Saul right here is being warned, like, you need to listen, be obedient. And Christ gives us this perfect example in John 14:31 about obedience. So I actually just want to read that really quick. But that the world may know that I love the Father, and as the Father gave me commandment, even so I do. We see that since Christ, he always like that I love the Father. And as the Father gave me commandment, even so I do. He gives the perfect example of like, since I love the Father, I will do everything that he commands me to do. And we have right here that Saul is like, hey, you need to listen. You are the Lord's anointed. Listen. I also love too the example of Adam, and this is in the Pearl of Great Price. It's in Moses 5:5-6 when he says, I know not except the Lord hath commanded me. So we see like these examples of like following and obeying the Lord. But we're going to see how Saul takes this pretty shortly here. Okay, thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them in the way that they came out of Egypt. I want to do a little bit of backstory about Amalek. So Amalek is technically, if we go into the genealogy, he is related to Esau. He is one of the sons of Esau's son. We find this in Genesis 36:12-16, and then also in 1 Chronicles 1:34-36. And if you remember, so Jacob and Esau, they were brothers. Jacob was the one who had the covenant promise come through, and Esau was not. So Esau did have rights. So the Lord did bless Esau and give them land. So we find this in Deuteronomy 2:4-5, and also in Deuteronomy 23:7. And I actually really wanted to read that one to kind of give, but then I want to go over why there's this harshness. So in Deuteronomy 23:7, it says, thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because he was a stranger in his land. And then I also want to go into Deuteronomy 2:4-5 really quick. So, and command thou the people, saying, ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not as much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. I want to point this out because the Amalekites had a choice. They are descendants of Esau too. But they're very related, obviously, to Edomites because of the fact they're from Esau. And they had a choice, but what they chose to do instead is they attacked the children of Israel. So this is going to be in Exodus 17, which we're going to turn to So this is even before Deuteronomy. They had already kind of like set in stone what was going to happen to them. They could have had this promise, but instead, what they decide to do is attack them while they are vulnerable. Okay, so the Lord says to Moses, I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the sun. Okay, so it's 17 verses, this is Exodus 17 verses 14, starting here. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out of remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nisi. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek for generation to generation. We're also going to see in Deuteronomy 25. Let me go forward to Deuteronomy 25 really quick. 17 through 19. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when ye were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thy enemies round about in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. So we have, these were promises that the Lord made to Moses and to Joshua. And they could have had a different promise. They are from Esau's heritage. They could have had a different promise, but they made a choice to attack the Israelites when they were weak and vulnerable and went after the weakest of them. And then it was that fight. And after that, it was like, hey, the Lord's going to have war on you. We always have a choice. And I just want to put this in because it's like we all have our agency. We're going to see what happens with Saul's agency in here. We all have a choice to make. We all can choose to be chosen by the Lord. We can all be adopted into the house of Israel when we take on the name of Christ upon ourselves. We can choose that. But we can also choose other decisions that are going to honestly lead to destruction in the end. And that's what happened with the Amalekites. So when we're reading this story, it sometimes can be hard to be like, why would the Lord command to kill an entire people? Because when we get into this, it's pretty harsh. And that's why I wanted to give a lot of backstory on the Amalekites. We see that the Lord is always going to fulfill his promises. And he said, like, in the lands when they have rest from thine enemies round about in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. And right here we see that now they have made it into the promised land. They have had rest. They've had the period of the judges. Now we're into the kings, and it's like, all right, it's time now. Like this promise needs to be fulfilled. So I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Really quick to get an understanding of what this destruction is. The Hebrew word here would be Hurim, which I'm not sure if I'm saying that 100% right. But I want to go into Leviticus 27, and it's going to be 28 through 29. So let me flip there really quick because I want to kind of explain a little bit more backstory I feel like is needed to fully understand what is happening here. So this is Leviticus 27, 28 through 29. Notwithstanding no devoted thing that a man shall devote unto the Lord of all that he hath, both of man and beast, and of the field of his possession shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy unto the Lord. None devoted which shall be devoted of men shall be redeemed, but shall surely be put to death. So here we're going to see that this is like a sacred, irrevocable ban. Okay, we also see this in Joshua 6, 17 through 21, and Joshua 7 I want to go into as well. So when in Joshua, let's flip to that super quick here. Joshua 6, 17 through 21. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live. she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed. When ye take of the accursed thing and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. This is really quite important. But all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. So the people went up into the city, every man straight before him in the city. And they utterly destroyed all was in the city, both man and women, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. Okay, so when the Lord calls for this, he doesn't do it very often. But when he does, it is a complete and absolute destruction of everything. And we're going to see, I want to give this example in Joshua of what happens when somebody did not follow through with it. So we have this story here. Okay, so when it wasn't followed perfectly from Joshua 6, we see what happens in chapter 7. And what happens is that he sends some spies up to Ai. And the spies say, do not make the whole people toil up there, for there are only a few. So about 3,000 men went up there from the people, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai killed about 36 of their men and chased them before the gate as far as Shebarium, and struck them at the descent. And the hearts of the people melted and became water. Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth before the ark of the Lord that evening, he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, alas, O Lord, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites and destroy us? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say when Israel has turned their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name? Okay, so what happens here? When somebody makes a sin as well, it doesn't just impact themselves. So what is happening here? They were supposed to, Hiram, so utter destruction, this Jericho. And when they go to do it, there is one man named Achan, and he actually takes from the city instead of giving it to the Lord. And because of that, the Lord has cursed them. If you remember, like, hey, if you take anything, then Israel will be cursed. Because he made that one choice, now we have that 36 of the men were killed that went up, and they ran away from the men of Ai. And once that word would be brought back, I mean, you would definitely have all the Canaanites being like, wow, the Lord has left them. Let's kill them all. Like, what are we doing? Let's get rid of them. Okay, and so when they find out that Achan had done this thing, so since Achan had done this sin, it basically cursed all of Israel. And the Lord even said, there are devoted things in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the devoted things from among you. With this call of destruction, we're going to see how Saul handles this. And then if you think about that story with Joshua and Achan, how that really went down. So the Lord has commanded him to destroy all of them. And I just want to point out too, because I think sometimes when we get into these really hard chapters and we're like, why would the Lord ever command anybody to be utterly destroyed? I think it's just huge to remember that the Lord knows all. We only have a little bit. His ways are higher than our ways. We don't get to see the whole big picture. So for the Lord, death isn't the end. It doesn't feel like near as scary to the Lord, because he also has a plan for the people. At this point in time, they do not have the resurrection of Christ yet, but the Lord already knows what the plan is. And this isn't the worst thing that could happen. Death isn't necessarily the worst thing that could happen. In fact, all of us are going to have to taste of death. So I think with him having the big picture, it's not how we're going to see it. All right, so now we're going to see Saul is going to summon the people, and he numbered them, so 2,000 men on foot and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to the city of Amalek and lay in wait in the city. Then Saul said to the Kenites, go down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you show kindness to all the people of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. The Kenites were probably a Midianite tribe descended from Abraham and his wife Keturah. So Moses' marriage to Jethro's daughter. Jethro was the priest. and prince of Midian, was a cause of the long-standing relationship with the Israelites. So he's like, hey, we do not want to hurt you guys. And the Kenites, they depart. And Saul defeated the Amalekites. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and devoted destruction all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and the oxen and the fattened calves and the lambs that was all good, and would not utterly destroy them. All that was despised and worthless they devoted to destruction. So Saul does like all the dirty work. He kills all the women and the children. He's just like, yeah, no, we can kill all of them. But he's like, let's save the best of the cattle and the sheep. And let's not kill Agag. Let's just bring him back captive. He did the worst part of it. So I'm like, why not just finish it at that point? But we're going to find out that Saul listens to the people instead of to what Samuel said from the Lord. And then we're also going to see, okay, I just have to tie this in because I do think this is really cool, because the Lord always does fulfill his plans, and he always does take care of his people. It might not be in the timing that we think it should be in. Like right here, he saves Agag. And what I want to point out is Agag, if we actually go into Esther 3:1-15, Haman the Agagite is from Agag's posterity and seeks to destroy all the Jews. So if you remember that, that's with Mordecai and Esther. And he's like, I want to kill all the Jews because Mordecai wouldn't bow to me. And he builds this huge gallows and he plans to hang Mordecai there, and he wants to kill all of the Jews. Okay, and so he wants to exterminate all of them. What I think is really cool here is then when you go, Mordecai and Esther's, they are actually descendants of Kish. So they are descendants of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. And you can find that in Esther 2:5-7. And then we see how they turn out to defeat Haman, and how it almost like fulfills what should have happened here. It's almost like it fulfills 600 years later, which I think is just so neat that the Lord has that little tie-in. So I just want to point that out. But Saul right here decides to not kill Agag, and they save all the best. So the word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments. And Samuel was angry, and he cried to the Lord all that night. The fact that Samuel cried all that night, I love Josephus, how he brings up that he actually tried to basically help Saul in this place. Now, I mean, we don't know for sure what that was, but I do want to point this out. So this is in Josephus. This is in Antiquities of the Jews. He says, he therefore told Samuel the prophet that he repented that he had made Saul king, while he did nothing that he had commanded him, but indulged his own inclinations. When Samuel heard that, he was in confusion and began to beseech God all that night to be reconciled to Saul and not to be angry with him. But he did not grant that forgiveness to Saul which the prophet asked for, as not deeming it a fit thing to grant forgiveness of such sins in his entreaties, since injuries do not otherwise grow so great as by the easy tempers of those that are injured. For while they hunt all the glory of being thought gentle and good-natured, before they are aware, they produce other sins. So I love, like, we don't have that in any of the translations that I review, just that's in Antiquities of the Jews. So I do love, though, because we have in here that, and Samuel was angry and he cried to the Lord all night. So we know that he was like, no way. There was something that was really hard for Samuel that night, for him to cry all night to the Lord. Going further into Saul, we talked about like how insecurities, I have a note over here. He wasn't leading or humble. He was insecure. This is not humility as a focus on oneself and external validation. True humility would have pulled him out of himself, a quiet strength. Too often we get the two confused. This turns out to cost Saul his kingship. The reason why I have that note in here for me is because we're going to start seeing now he was insecure, and I feel like that allows also a ton for pride, like we talked about earlier. When Samuel rose early to meet Saul, and it was told Samuel, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself. So Saul put up a whole monument for himself, not one to the Lord, for him. And turned and passed on and went down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed be you to the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. I want to point this out because this is going to be throughout this whole chapter. Going forward a little bit, we're going to come back. But starting in verse 20 and going until verse 20, so just verse 20, it says, I have, is what Saul says. Like, I'm amazing. I've done all these things. He gives no credit to the Lord. It's all him. He has a monument for himself. I am the king. Okay, well, then we see too, the way that he puts this, blessed be you to the Lord. But then we see, and Samuel said, then what is this bleating of sheep in my ears? He's just like, hey, like, why is this? I told you utter destruction, and I reminded you, like, listen, you're the anointed. Listen, you need to obey the Lord. And Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. So there's a couple of things in here. One, he blames the people, right? He feared the people more than God. So for the people spared the best, and they have brought them. And going forward, and here we're going to see further on in the chapter, he's going to say, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. And he will say, but the people took the spoil. He's going to pin it all on the people. And then I did all what was right, but the people messed up. But then he realizes, I feared the people more than the Lord. The next thing I want to point out, to sacrifice to the Lord your God. All of a sudden, Saul no longer says the Lord. He doesn't say my Lord. He doesn't say our God. He doesn't put any of that. He completely removes himself from it. It's now, Lord, your God, Samuel. That's yours. We're seeing how far Saul has truly started to fall at this point in time. We're really getting to see how far that Saul has truly slipped. It was a slow fade coming down, but now all of a sudden it's no longer even my God. And we're going to see him reference this again later in the chapter. Okay, so when he says this, and the rest we've devoted to destruction, like, hey, we've done all the rest. Samuel says, stop, I will tell you what the Lord has said to me this night. And he says, speak. Samuel says, though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel. This is where we see, okay, like, even though you're little in your own eyes, like, you're insecure, but that you still were the anointed king. You're still him. The Lord set you apart. He brought you out from being little to giving you this title. This title isn't making you more important of the Lord. And this is where we're going to have Saul, where I was talking about I have, because Samuel says, and do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have devoted the Amalekites to destruction. But the people took the spoil, sheep and oxen, the best of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. If you remember from Leviticus 27 through 29, this isn't how it works. Anything that's for destruction cannot be redeemed, cannot be sacrificed in that way. It is no longer fit for a sacrifice. It cannot be redeemed in any way. So we see like how far that Saul has kind of like fallen from even knowing just even the Lord's commands. I mean, if you think about it, he had to be told that the people were eating of the blood in the last chapter. He didn't notice that and see it and step in. It was after he realized, oh no. And it's like here, he doesn't even realize what he's saying in a way. He's being pretty naive, surprisingly, for being in the culture. It feels to me like he is being so naive, like he's not even remembering the story of Achab. Like it's not even there from Joshua 7. So Samuel said, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. His rebellion turned out to be rejection. The anointing is now being removed because of lack of obedience, just like Eli's family, Eli's sons. I also love too that it talks about like, and presumption is an iniquity and idolatry. So acting in one's own self-will is destructive. It's being compared to idolatry here. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis. It's murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. I love how it gives this example because sometimes I feel like whenever there is a sin, it's pulling us away from the Lord. And oftentimes we want to justify our own sins to be like, for instance, I've heard one, well, I'm looking at pornography. It's not like I'm having an affair. Or you have instances where people are like, yeah, but I'm just doing this little thing. It's not that bad. But if it pulls you away from the Lord, in the end, it is destructive. It leads straight down that path. And so anytime somebody's sinning, it is hurting others and it's hurting the Lord. Even in the experience of Achan that we went over in Joshua 7, we see that his disobedience cost the lives of 36 men and also put all of Israel into fear. It seemed like a little sin. I'm just going to take these little things. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to miss these. Like, nobody's going to see that I did this. But those little sins they lead to destruction just as much as anything else. And I think that that's a big lesson that we can take home from this chapter. Also, while I'm going through here, I want to clarify that I'm superhuman and I'm very bad at pronouncing a lot of the names. So I think Achan is more like Achan. So when I'm talking about that, if you were a little confused as to who I was referencing to, I'm referencing to Achan in Joshua chapter 7. Going back in for Saul. So Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I've transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. I want to point out, as we hear Saul's apology, there is true repentance is very heartfelt, trying to turn back away from sin. When we hear Saul's, we start to realize that he's caring more about maintaining his image than actually turning back to the Lord, which is different in here, because I think sometimes when we compare this and we compare it when Nathan comes to King David and he accuses him of like, hey, you've sinned. When David responds, there's just a huge difference from what we hear from Saul's difference. Saul is trying to maintain his relationships and still look good in the people's eyes because he feared the people, and he still is fearing the people and their voice. Makes me think of all the times too when there's times when I fear people for sure. Like, I'm scared to speak what I truly believe in a circumstance because I'm afraid that this person will hate me if I say this, or I feel like it's very easy to do. So when I'm looking at this too, I can see how Saul could have this problem. Like I said, I like to liken scriptures to myself, and I want to learn from that and be like, okay, so when I'm in these situations, I need to stand up better for my beliefs. I need to not be so afraid to voice my opinion on things in certain situations. Saul also says, now therefore, please pardon my sin and return with me, that I may bow before the Lord. And Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you've rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. As Samuel turned to go away, Saul seized the skirt of his robe, and it tore. And Samuel said to him, the Lord has tore the kingdom of Israel from you this day and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. When I think about this, I also think about C.S. Lewis has a quote, and it goes, for you will certainly carry out God's purpose, however you act, but it makes a difference to you whether you serve like Judas or like John. And I feel like we see here that it's like God is sovereign. He has plans. His plan will not fail. He still knows what he's going to do here, but he also gives people free will, and he does grieve when we choose poorly. He feels it breaks his heart when we choose poorly. But at the same point, his plan is not going to be frustrated just because we made a bad choice, which can be both relieving and also in this case, like kind of nerve-wracking, right? Of like, oh wow, I really screwed up and now it's torn away from me and it's going to be given to somebody else. So then Saul, this is him responding again, I have sinned, yet honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel. And this is where I wanted to point out, he still cares so much about what the people think. He wants to maintain that. He's like, hey, like, I sinned, but please keep me as a big deal in the people's eyes. Like, don't take that away from me. And then he says to him, and return with me that I may bow before the Lord your God. Again, Saul has pulled himself away from the Lord. This is now Samuel and Samuel's God. No longer is it Saul's. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul bowed before the Lord, which is great, but he also is not. He's your God in Saul's eyes. Now we see that Samuel is going to finish the dirty work. He's going to kill Agag, the king of the Amalekites, because Samuel always is going to Now we're going to see that Samuel is going to finish, because he always does obey the Lord. He's going to kill King Agag. When he goes to kill him, I want to point this out because in the ESV it says, and Agag came to him cheerfully. I don't think that's probably quite the right word there. It says also, if you go down, or haltingly, it could have also been uncertain if you go in the notes there. The KJV version says delicately. And then it says in the NIV that he came in chains. So I'm sure that he wasn't probably cheerfully coming to his death, but just to kind of give you like a few different options there. And Samuel, he kills him there. What we find out too at the end of this is that Samuel, this is in verse number 35, and Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord regretted that he made Saul king over Israel. Samuel no longer is going to be supporting, advising, helping Saul. Saul is still going to act as king, but his anointing is technically now invalid due to his disobedience. And he's no longer who the Lord has chosen as king. So we see that it's like, okay, now it's done. His true reign is over. Even though he still acts as king, he's no longer the Lord's king or the Lord's anointed, and Samuel no longer will be advising him. I know that these are kind of like three depressing, well, not all of them, because 14's actually really, really fun with Jonathan. But some of these are a little bit depressing. So I think when we're just going through this, just remembering that all the time it's usually a slow fade before people completely forget who their Lord is. And like, oh, you're a God, not my God anymore. So as we're going through and as we're studying, it just shows how important it is that we continue to do those little things. It's not a one-time big thing. The one big change that Saul had where his heart was changed wasn't enough to keep him spiritually, continuously working on that relationship with the Lord. And I think that this is just a huge caution for us. Let us start serving the Lord now. Let us serve him every day. Let us make sure that we have those little things in place in our lives, those Ebenezers, where it's like, all right, we pray, we read our scriptures, we do those things every day to keep that relationship strong so that we do not fall into this trap of just slowly fading away. And I just want to bear my testimony of this, and I say these things in Jesus Christ. Amen.